Well, welcome to Pillow Talk. I'm Grant. This is my wife, Stephanie. And after almost 38 years of marriage, we've discovered how to communicate for better understanding and yoke our differences to pull stronger toward a common purpose.
As certified marriage coaches, we want to help reignite passion and connectedness in your marriage through intimate, authentic, and unguarded conversations. Now let's have some pillow talk.
Let's do it. Hey, welcome to Pillow Talk. We are wrapping up a series that we've been on now for weeks.
A lot of weeks.
We've had very good response. We've had some great guests.
Yes, we have.
We've got some great guests scheduled in the future.
First of the year is going to have a couple of good ones, huh?
Yeah, looking forward to that. Man, love Kyle and Ariel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they run Couplepreneur. So as we move into the first of the year, discussing how you can, keep your relationship close while moving towards your goals as a couple, I guess. And I just made a lot of racket there.
Yes, you did. That was loud.
And then we've got Greg and Julie scheduled. Gorman, Married for a Purpose. We've got a commitment from Expedition Marriage.
That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fun.
We've got a lot of really good things coming up.
It's been a great year
of,
as we stepped into this, the wonderful connections and networks that have appeared, and the podcast world is such a neat space to be in right now in communication. So it's been a lot of fun this year. So I'm very thankful for the viewers the listeners.
Well, we got some viewers.
We have some
too.
viewers, yeah.
We're also on YouTube.
I never say the right thing.
So it's good. This episode will not be on. Well, it might. I think I'll just, we don't have video set up, so I'm thinking about just doing the, what would you call it? Adding a few pictures, but going ahead and putting the podcast as well on YouTube. Seems like it tends to be working pretty well. So anyway, let's
fourth pillar. So we've talked about intimacy, that intimacy is more than sex. Intimacy is knowing each other, and knowing each other starts with knowing God. And so there's spiritual intimacy. There is the emotional intimacy. What does that look like? There, of course, was the physical intimacy. And then today, intellectual intimacy. We're going to talk about this. I think when we had James and Lisa on, we kind of tapped into this a little bit with them and art espousing. That was a great interview. And so I think we're going to finish this up and finish the year.
Into it on our last podcast when we were actually being interviewed
by Greg and by Julie. By Julie.
We were helping her.
Well, it's interesting, babe, because I feel like when we first started this, we talked about we should do a podcast on intimacy. Gosh, way back in September, I think is when this all started. How little I realized that people need this, and how much depth there is to this beyond just talking about physical intimacy. Yeah. So it's been a great journey of you and I talking about these things as we become very aware of them, things that we were probably doing, but to be able to put a picture to it and a dialogue with it so that other people can hopefully learn or get some ideas or get some direction for their own marriage of some ways to fluff up all the areas of your marriage. Right. The whole tire needs to be full, no flats.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely an area that's been neglected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's for one reason is either you are an intellectual, so it's easy, or you're not what you would consider to be an intellectual, which would be like me, and to have those kind of conversations have to be very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think though it's an area that has been neglected for the fact that the majority of people aren't your professors and stuff like that just enjoy.
I think we do. I feel like in our generations, we tag intellectuals, and in all right intent, it's true to a large extent, of those very educated, very, people that spend a lot of time in think tanks or spend a lot of time teaching high levels, and they're an intellectual. It's like, but that's kind of their job, so that's why they're that way. But, we all have been given intellect. That is the ability and the capacity to think and to dream and to create. That's where your intellect is. And so I think that's where this is going to be a good podcast, is to kind of show that you don't have to be a professor or a high-level think tank type person to have intellect. And if you're not exploring the intellectual side of your relationship in a marriage, then you definitely have a flat side. And I think that's where, a lot of people struggle. And when they begin to have these conversations as a couple, it really has been just such a positive. We had a lot of positives in our life when we started to track this a little bit.
An intellectual conversation is kind of the umbrella over all the other intimacies.
Mm-hmm.
You take your spiritual as kind of your foundation.
It's foundation. That's good. Yeah.
But your intellectual is kind of your umbrella. And so it's very important for us as a married couple to, it's easy to be off color and dirty a little bit when you're talking about physical intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to have a good intellectual discussion about it.
Yeah.
And it's the same way on our emotional side. It's one thing to discuss emotions. Well, you're just always emotional, so it can be very accusational. But it's another thing to discuss what is an emotion. How does that emotion work? Why is it affecting us in that way? So those are just areas that we're going to get into explaining how to make all the other areas more fruitful, I think.
Oh, it's expansion. I think for me, it's always expansion. One of my favorite passages in the Word is in Proverbs, and it talks about that, you throw back the curtains of your habitation, you spread it out, you lengthen the cords, you strengthen the stakes. And that's Isaiah, I'm sorry, not Proverbs. To me, that was such a beautiful picture of, especially at the start of a year, what am I going to do this year? What skill set do I already have that I'm going to strengthen? What do I need to add? Where am I going to expand? And I think a lot of that is in these pillars. It's understanding that we have such a capacity for expansion that God is still creating. Well, that's how we need to be in our own personal development growth. Is like you never reach a point where you stop. So yes, I think that expansion is going to be my word for next year, but not at the waistline.
Well, I'll agree with you on that.
Some expansion is not good.
So if we're going to have an intellectual conversation, what should that look like? And to me, I think it definitely should be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Any other ideas?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think we can definitely unpack that. I think also when you're talking about intellectualism, because you're talking about how you think and how you think right now in the season of life that you're in, I think having an affirming intellectual intimacy is important. And then you said something the other day that was great, that curiosity or to be captivated, to be intentional about being captivated by the thoughts that your spouse brings to the table instead of automatically disagreeable.
Yeah.
So I think those three would be the ones I think would be a good conversation to have as a couple to start with.
Yeah. So let's start off just then with the first one. It should be challenging. So what does that, when you think of that, what does that mean to you? What do you see if a conversation is challenging? What is it?
Oh, I think like in our marriage, let's just talk about us. I think where I get challenged is when, because we are different and we learn differently. So when you bring something to the table, I will immediately feel challenged. And I've learned that the feeling is challenged, not offended. There's sometimes when you would bring something to me that would maybe challenge my belief, but instead of stretching that capacity for why do I believe the way I believe, I would be offended that you would be coming against my faith, so to speak.
Yeah, so it's really an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to grow, yeah. But I think you have to be careful because I think a stronger spouse can really dampen that door being, I don't know. I feel like for me, intellectualism is a really tough one because I think it's really easy to step back into yourself and think, oh, well, my ideas must be stupid, so I'm not going to say it again. And I think that's where you can be challenged, but you also, on the other side of that, have to be careful that you don't dampen your spouse's enthusiasm to step into a space that's scary. Does that kind of address that?
Yeah, it does. To me, it's so vital that you challenge and then allow the statement, realizing the statement may not even be their final statement.
True.
They're working through that conversation at the same time. We've had lots of conversations that we just say, hey, let me just talk this out, and so, like you'll say something and say then, let me say it better, because you realize that the way it comes across on the first statement could be a little confrontational or just maybe hitting an area that we don't want to hit.
Yeah, I think that goes back to a lot of the other podcasts we've talked about. This is something that you don't start intellectual intimacy exploring this if you can't communicate without having a fight. Right. So I think if you're not there yet, then this is something that you become aware of, but maybe this is not the first stage that you take because intellectual intimacy involves so many arenas of life, and it really starts to cut the butter. It's going to be so many areas that as a human you're beginning to explore, and you're having to learn to articulate your thoughts. So not only are you learning to think, you're also having to articulate them in a way that comes across better and better, where I don't always have to say, I can say that better. At some point, my goal is to get where I don't have to say that.
Well, it's a growth process. And so as you're growing, it's also your spouse should be hoping to get to a place where you don't have to say it better. Mm-hmm. He just understands we're on the same team. We're working together in this thing. Yeah. So the growth is happening at both times. That's the stretch. It's stretching us. Stretching is always uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
But it's necessary if you want to go to the next level. You got to stretch the ability that you have right now. It was back when I played basketball. The extra hours put in was never comfortable.
Right.
But
that's what expands your capacity, though. Right. You can't. If you think about a balloon when it's just sitting there, even with a little bit of air in it, has so much more capacity. But until there is a force applied, that doesn't expand. And then you don't ever know how much capacity is there. So I think we have to be okay with, yes, being a little uncomfortable doesn't mean that you are changing your whole foundation of belief, or that you're automatically there's a lot of things you and I still don't see the same way on because we're different. But we are stretching and trying to broaden our perspective on both sides of that, because it's not a foundational truth that one of us is completely off on. It's perspective, and
we're seeing how bringing those two perspectives together creates
a much stronger picture and a much stronger impact, right? And we're all about impact. That's what we want. Yeah.
So challenging conversation is very important, but it should also be affirming.
It should be what?
Affirming.
Yeah. Well, I was also going to say, I think in challenging each other, I think knowing your spouse's communication style is important in that, because knowing your audience. I love that, because to challenge somebody you can come across very aggressive, and I think that's not what you want with your spouse. And I think you want to. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we kind of talk about that there needs to be some boundaries even in that conversation of challenging each other.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And again, it's also coming at it with they're not trying to talk down to me, but you got to prove yourself in that first. It ain't just something that,
especially if you're the stronger spouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one can be stronger and so more aggressive, but the other can be, and this is just kind of describing mine and Stephanie's personalities. You're very direct. Like this is when you say something. You am. So, there's not a lot of fluff in what's said, so therefore it can be taken wrong. Well, it can only be taken wrong if I choose to take it wrong. Now, it again, that goes all back to the feelings and all that stuff. But, our conversations has blossomed more because we've chosen better not to take it as, he's attacking me, or not to take it as she's just saying she's right, and that's the end result.
Yeah. And what you just mentioned too, I think affirming, that definitely comes into it. Affirming the value of my opinion, or affirming the value of your opinion. Yeah, I value the fact that you have an opinion. And I think so many times for us, that was kind of the missing thread, was we were challenging each other, but we were not affirming each other. I think that is something that we have to understand and maybe I think affirmation is such an interesting concept. It's not just telling somebody sweet and precious words. It's actually um, adding value to somebody's opinions and thoughts. And I think that is not something our culture is good at, because to affirm somebody's opinion means you might have to expose yourself a little bit and say, I don't have that opinion at all, but I see that I affirm the value of what that is for you.
Right.
And I think that is something where, division has created a lack of this. I think affirmation and valuing the opinions of others does not mean I have to agree with your opinion. It is expressing, I see the value of your opinion to you. And I think those type of words are very important, especially in a marriage. I know so often, I think maybe as a woman, this is why this feels this way to me. The reason that it's very important to me is when I feel like you're actually listening to me, when you can see that, man, you're challenging me, and I don't hold the same opinion of something as you do, but it's not like this. Well, think about long enough, you'll come around.
Mm-hmm.
You're never that way. You're like, well, okay. So tell me, expound with me your opinion on this. Then how is it really different? If it is, expound that for me, because I do value and affirm that what you think is important and it's valuable, and it's not just whatever, you'll get it, you stupid woman. I mean, that's been a culture thing that we easily step into as women.
Right.
And I think that's not right any more than it is for a man to naturally be that way. But I'm just saying, sometimes it's a trigger that shouldn't be there, but sometimes it is. So
right. And it's usually caused from previous conversations. We got to really be careful on how we say things. And, it doesn't mean that we should, how would you say it? Walk around on eggshells.
yeah.
But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with taking a pause before you speak. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of it. Is a lot of times, sorry, I had to make a slight adjustment there. A lot of times what we do is forget that what we're about to say can have lasting
Mm-hmm.
effect.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, what you're getting ready to say will have lasting
Mm-hmm.
effect. Now you choose which effect you want it to have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be really important that, you're thinking of how will this build up and affirm what they're saying, even when I don't agree.
And sometimes it's like, we talk about this a lot. This doesn't come natural and doesn't come quickly. It takes practice. Sometimes it looks like this. You and I are having a conversation, and I say something or you say something that's really different than what we've ever talked about before. Instead of being like, what in the world? It's like, interesting. I've never heard you express it like that before. Talk about that. It's just affirming with your words and your body language that I'm encouraging you to continue in this vein, and I'm not putting the wet blanket on this. Right. So that's what it can look like, is just how you say it. So it's practicing when I know we're going to have an intellectual conversation, which is a lot, but it's like when I know you're going to bring, especially when I see you watching, or I hear you talking about somebody new that you're listening to or watching, I have learned that, okay, he's going to be bringing something to me that my face is going to show something different. So I'm going to have to make sure that I have words that are greater than my facial expression. And so I really try to practice that. Like, wow, okay. Tell me more about this. What is he saying about this? Or what did she say about this? Or it's really just trying to have, which kind of is another point of intellectual intimacy, is a curiosity on purpose.
Right. Say that.
For something.
Into that.
Yeah. Have some curiosity, and we all have curiosity. Some have more than others. I'm annoyingly curious. But other people, you can establish curiosity. And so instead of, again, me being, oh boy, another person you're listening to, who are these wackos? Where do you pull these guys out of the woodwork? Okay. I'm curious. What is going on in your brain right now that this is what you're drawn to? I'm curious. So instead of being close-minded, I want to stretch and expand,
Right.
then I choose to be captivated on purpose by the train of thought or the environment that you are currently curious about.
Right. Well, like right now, I am seeing a major neglect in training young boys to be men.
Yeah.
I'm seeing houses with basically two mothers, even though they're a man and a wife, male and female. Let's put it in today's terms, even though it's probably still wrong. And so, therefore, I brought a guy to the conversation a few weeks ago that he really pushes the envelope. I mean,
For me, he does for sure.
Oh, he does for everybody. I mean, but yes, if you're a woman, the way he says things can be very offensive. And so if you don't look at it from the aspect of where is he trying to go, so you can say, okay, I agree where he's going. I disagree with the road he's taking. Okay, so, and that's how I was bringing it.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, that could be very challenging for the female spouse from the side of, do you look at me that way?
Yeah, good point.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, he's just filling an empty spot where I've been thinking about for a while. And so therefore, you know, I'm talking about it because that's what I'm listening to. And I'm pulling some nuggets out that I said, these are true. And honestly, if I could pat myself on the back in one area, I think I'm very good at that.
Oh, you're very good at that. And that's, I love.
I don't just jump in and, now this is who I am today.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's what I love. I think and I think it's because your relator strength is so strong now. You've really developed that. I think you're very quickly able to compartmentalize things that's what I'm looking for. There's a spice that I need for what, you're able to take, the recipe you're trying to create. And so you're able to listen to a vast source and breadth of ideology. I can't even say it. Ideology.
That may not even be real words.
Ideology.
That's not even a word.
I love that. And then bring it in, and because I am so black and white, I think pretty deep, but I don't think very wide sometimes. And so I think that's where you're good. You're a wide thinker and I'm a deep thinker. So I think that's, if you didn't bring some fresh meat to the table, I would never quit chewing on the same piece, Right. And so I think that's the beautiful thing that you bring. And I think that's really great because I would not be able to do that without you. There's just no way.
So to me, in order to be a captivated listener, there's a few things that we just need to really concentrate on. And one is we need to remove distractions when we're in the process trying to have an intellectual conversation.
Yeah.
That's not the time to be watching. Okay, both ways. If your wife or man, or whichever one loves football, is watching a football game, that's not the time to come in and say, hey, I was just thinking.
Oh, yeah.
If you want good feedback.
Right.
Because even if they turn off the football game, their mind's still going to be there because that's where they were at just 2 seconds before.
Yeah.
So, save these kind of conversations probably more for after dinner or as you're getting into bed. I don't know when you all have your conversations.
Yeah, every
Ours
couple's
is an
different, but or in a drive, or it's just, or it's the thing of like, hey, like you came in this morning, you said, hey, what's on your mind? I'm like, oh, it's exhausting being in my head. That's what I always say because it is. But that's just like a cue for you. Like, all right, there's a lot going on here. It has nothing to do with you, but I'm thinking about a lot of things right now. And then you're pretty good about saying, all right, let's peel them back. Which one do we need to work on right now? And then that's how our conversations will start a lot of times because, I'll just be all over the place. But now you're also not going to come in and sit in my chair in my office at 5:00 and say, hey, I've been watching this podcast and I really want to unpack, and it's going to be challenging. That is also not the time to come talk to me, and vice versa. So I think and that all goes back to being a spouse that understands your spouse's love language, their communication styles, and as we've talked so many times before, their strengths and their core values, because I don't want to come in there and interrupt something that would violate a core value for you just so I can have an intellectual conversation because I've got something in my head right now.
Right.
I think you have to be patient enough. If it's worth talking about, it can wait until the right time. Mm-hmm. If you just got to get it out right now, then probably you need to step back in your own space and kind of talk it out with yourself first.
Yeah. And I would say, like me and you both are very busy people. We work lots of hours, and, most people in the world do. So you're not always breaking a core value. Sometimes you're just interrupting some downtime the other one needs.
Oh, which is huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And how we, and so I guess that's really more how we recharge. Introvert, extrovert, know your spouse. If it's been days and I haven't had any downtime, alone time, that's not the time to try to stretch my brain. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to recharge and plug in a little bit first, so, but I think it's also, not only is it removing distractions, but as we just mentioned, we just talked about that, but it's being curious. And I think if you're curious, it helps you to remember what that conversation is going to look like. Mm-hmm. Like if it's not a good time right now, but I'm so curious about what you're thinking. So if I'm curious about what you're thinking, when the time comes, I'm not going to forget what I was curious about, right? As opposed to just checking something off the box. Okay, well, we have to have an intellectual conversation. Here's my subject. Let's do it tonight. Oh, you're watching football. Well, now I forgot what I was going to say. You're not curious. That's just checking a box.
That's good.
So I think also being curious is what?
Asking questions. Asking
better questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Not just, hey, what's wrong? What's on your head? It's, you're great at asking questions, actually. But how does that make you feel? Man, you had a stressful day at work, so you had a really rough time with that client. Well, how's that making you feel right now?
Mm-hmm. When you hear that, what do you think?
Yeah,
why? And why is don't start with why very often. Why is very accusational.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a time and a place for, why. And it's, like, well, why do you think that person meant this, or that I meant that?
What is causing you to have that automatic thought process and perception of that conversation or that engagement, whoever it is or whatever it is?
Is this taking you closer to what you want, or are we making just some bad decisions here?
Are you just tired? Babe, have you had some downtime lately? Is it just hard for you right now to process this?
Say, is it your time of the month?
Don't say that.
You lose.
Don't say
Men,
that.
You lose.
You should know that. Let me just say this. In an intimate relationship, men, if you don't know pretty closely what your wife's cycle is and understand where those times in the weeks are going to be, shame on you.
True.
Okay? Wives, don't act like you don't know what time of the month it is. Don't flip out on your husband when you know in 2 days it's that time. Like, come on.
But, there's been multiple times over the years that it's actually snuck up more on you than me.
Oh, absolutely.
And I would actually say, do you think it's possible in a nice, kind way? You can't be accusational to say.
No, you were good about that.
Is it possible the reason you're having, you always have headaches.
Yeah.
Is it possible the reason you're not feeling good now is because that's coming right around the corner, so let's just back off.
Yeah, it's like, you're right.
I can't believe we just went there.
We did.
This conversation.
Well, I know, isn't that funny? Talking about being captivated intellectually. But, seriously, I know as a woman, it's definitely not a good time to have a mind-expanding conversation 2 days before when my hormonal levels are all over the place. And it does affect how you think, okay? Right. How I think is not how I think. But 2 days before, I think differently.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can say amen.
Yeah. And men, you should say amen to that. So that actually was supposed to help men, not that's supposed to be a help. So, just be quiet.
Either don't bring it up at all or be very sensitive.
Yeah. Please be sensitive. It's not an on purpose thing for most women.
Exactly. So anyway, I think we ought to wind it up. We're winding it up not only for today, but for the rest of the year.
Season 1 is done.
Has come to an end.
Oh wait, is this season 2?
We have 2 seasons per year.
That's right. We do have 2 seasons. I don't do television seasons well. Like when somebody says they were they had 10 seasons. I think it's 10 years and it's only like 5 years.
Exactly. So, so we'll be back in January with our new interviews with some new topics, going deeper in some of the old topics.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't talk about the same thing over and over, you don't really learn it. So we'll be revisiting. I guarantee we'll be revisiting the pillars.
Absolutely. I think that's something that I'm just stunned by the amount of feedback that we've gotten on this particular series. I would have never guessed so many
information
couples.
we've gotten from our guests is
exactly.
If you haven't listened, go to the previous podcast and listen.
Listen to our guests.
Our guests are just been amazing. We just sit there and kind of like, wow.
Some great content. That's what it's all about, is sharing your content. Yeah.
So check us out. Subscribe to this podcast. You can. We're on Spotify, Anchor, and whatever that is, iTunes or iPodcast or whatever it is on your iPhone. You can also follow us on Instagram, Grant_Stephanie Forever with Purpose. You can follow us on Pillow Talk on Facebook. That's our group. Now you have to request to be in the group, but unless you are a serial killer, we will probably let you in.
So if you are, just don't tell us you're one.
Yeah, just say no on the question that says, "Are you a serial killer?" Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, and we are looking forward to a really great year coming up, and hope you do too. Have a very Merry Christmas.